Hey everyone. Okay, it should be set up. We'll give it a little while for people to come in. Do I have an estimate of when we'll receive milestone assessments? Good question. Um, no, I wanted to say this week, but I'm pretty sick at the moment, so I don't know. Hopefully this week. I just need to kind of get around to all of the tutors and talk to them. Um, Yeah. So maybe this week, maybe early next week. There are some Mech 1110 computer labs on right now, so viewership may be a tad lower. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, I don't expect a huge number of people here regardless, but if I can help, I may as well. Does anyone have any questions? I'm happy to do Q&A stuff first. It's generally my preference, and then we'll do some reviews. Do you think all of us have passed ENGG1500? No, not at all. A lot of people, won't pass, but no, I say a lot. I don't mean a large percentage. Like 90%ish of people will probably pass, but 10% of people don't on average, over 10% of people don't submit assignments. So about 10% of people just didn't submit the first report. About 11-12% of people just didn't do assessment 3. About 10% of people have shown up for less than half the weeks between week 6 and week 11 when we were doing milestones. So they just didn't get marks for those weeks because they just didn't do anything. Um, so it's not common for somebody to have shown up to every week and made a genuine attempt at every assessment task and fail in 1500. That's pretty rare. And by pretty rare, I'm talking less than 1% of the class. In some years, no one fails who's done all of those things. But you'd be astounded at the amount of people who just handed in 2 pages for assessment 2. So the first report, it was assessment 2, by the way. So yeah, we'll see. In previous years, it ends up being about 10% of people. How complete do you want a report to be for review? Sections okay. Yeah, I've got probably more than I can go through already. So what I'd be looking for in a report to review now might be something very specific, like, hey, I haven't written most of this, but I've had a really good attempt at writing, I don't know, an abstract or something. Can you just review that one bit? I'd be happy to potentially do that. Probably gonna. How would you structure a UML diagram for the robot project? So the UML diagrams are basically, just think of it like a flowchart of your decision making. So depending on how you guys did with the decided to tackle the track, you would have had some internal logic, right? Maybe it was a state machine that if it got certain things, it did certain things. Maybe it was just like your line following code that'd be like, if these sensors are seeing things, do this. If these are seeing things, do that. If none of the sensors are seeing anything, do something else. Do that thing until blah 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 changes. How do you put all of that sort of logic down? Because trying to write it out often doesn't make sense, because there's often multiple pathways that are going on simultaneously. And this is where UML diagrams come in. Don't put code in. Code's a disgusting thing to put in a report in general. So it's about going, how did we actually do this in a way that a human being can understand? So that's what you use your UML diagrams for. Basically, think of it like a flowchart for your logic. Ryan, it depends on what are UML diagrams and are they required in the design evaluation? It depends on your project. So if you wrote code, you almost certainly are going to want that in order to explain the logic of what your code does. But if you didn't, you probably don't need a UML diagram. Can we use the name of our design in our report? E.g., our glider is called the Stanley. Yeah, that's fine as long as it's not called the Stanley being named after one of the students. If somebody's name was Stanley and you named it after them, please don't do that. But yeah, if it was just a fun name, then that's fine. Can you please tell us where the Google Doc is for workshops and if we can see if attendance was marked? I've attended all of them. I just want to check to make sure it was documented. Oh, it's fine. Don't worry about it. You will never see the back end of that Google document. That's for Myos only because it's got other students' personal details in it. If you went to all of them, you went to all of them. Don't worry about it. There's your tutor will know that, and there's nothing for you to be stressed about at all. Okay. If you if you've gone to every single class, I will not let that attendance system hurt you. Stress less. Do we name the two people that helped us from DSTG? This is to softwares only. You could. It would look somewhat weird though. So I wouldn't. It's a little bit strange to have a report that's completely anonymous apart from like two people that you name. So I wouldn't name them. I would refer to them as DSTG member 1 and member 2. Do you think Studiously is a useful feedback tool for this report? It's fine. Well, whatever you find useful. Different people will find different things useful. If it helps you, it helps you, and thus it's useful, but eh. For the mech project, create a UML diagram of the way I'm guessing, designed, developed throughout the weeks. Not really. That's not really what a UML diagram is, but you absolutely could make a flowchart there. I'm kind of mixing terminology at the moment. Absolutely, a flowchart of your decision-making process could be super duper helpful. I wouldn't call that a UML, but yeah, that could be a helpful thing. We will do some peer review in a second. I just want to answer questions first and then do peer review second is my plan. I don't know how long the questions are going to take, but yeah. In the first report, the description of client and project scope were allowed to be on the same page. Is it fine if we leave them on the same page? Oh, piss off. Piss off menu. How do I get rid of you? For this report, even if they're both major headings. Are they both major headings? I didn't think they were both major headings. They might be. What am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? Assessment 6. Come on. Oh, I pinned them, didn't I? Yes, I did. Assessment 6 brief. Download. I don't know why I'm getting it this way, but whatever. There was almost certainly a smarter way to do this. Now, I can put that there, right? Yep. Yeah, so major headings are the things in bold, all right? Now you can, okay, the minimum amount of major headings are the things in bold. So, you must have an abstract acknowledgements introduction, which if you were to make this a major heading, you could just call it introduction, would be fine. Whatever. But this is a major heading. All of these you could consider subheadings within that. Now, you might not want to. You might want to say, I'm going to have an introduction and it's going to have these things in it, and then I'm going to have assumptions and models as another major heading because it's a huge thing and I really want to talk about it for quite a while because it turns out we made heaps of assumptions at the start that we thought were just like meh, whatever, and then they turned around to bite us in the ass. And I can't do a good evaluation of my design unless I've got a better set of assumptions and, oh crap, it's now 8 pages long. Sure, make assumptions and models a major heading at that stage, but these could all be subheadings. Don't know if it's a bit late, but can I email my half-stitched together draft? I don't need more for the stream. To be honest, I'm not going to get through what I've got, and I'm fucking dying at the moment. So, if you have something very specific you'd like me to look at, I'm happy for you to take that as an email. But I'd be looking at something that's like 1 or 2 pages of, can you look specifically at my figures, or can you look specifically at my blah, 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 and give me very focused feedback. Acknowledgements is not needed. Correct. What would you suggest transferring over from your A2? Depends on who you are as a writer. You could transfer almost all of it, with the exception of, like, there's no need to talk about the competency probably. That's probably a waste of time. But you might be able to transfer most of it over. This wording has deliberately stayed similar. If you're like me, and whenever you look back over your previous work, you really struggle to make it flow from that point onwards, I really struggle to recycle my own work. So I will almost always put it all in the bin and start again from scratch, even if I've written very similar things, because I would really struggle to write an evaluation and analysis if I hadn't recently written some of this introduction stuff. That's me. You're probably somewhere in between these two extreme ends. So move over as much as is helpful for you to move over, but be aware when you do it, sometimes starting again is faster than fixing up. So up to you. How many pages total is expected? I don't know. However many it adds up to be. That's a maximum of 12. These two combined are a maximum of 12, but then it depends, whether you put acknowledgements in, how you split up a whole bunch of this stuff. Varies drastically. When we have subheadings, should I use size 12 italics? I like size 12 italics for subheadings. I think that's appropriate, but whatever you think kind of works is fine. In the A6 brief, it says all major headings must start on a new page. How does that work with the introduction to the topic, which is multiple sections? I think we covered that, right? Introduction is a major heading. Now, you can consider more than one of these a major heading if you would like, but you do not have to. Is a UML diagram acceptable for ScreenFlow software? Absolutely. And don't get like too hung up on exact definitions of UML diagrams here, but yeah, conceptually this screen flows into this one. It represented graphically is a really nice thing to have. Yeah, that's the other thing, Uranium, right? There's another stream coming in 3 days' time, so if you haven't developed it enough yet, develop it some more for there, and maybe as a result of seeing this feedback, you might be like, cool, I can already incorporate a bunch. Let's go. Let's just ask for some specific feedback. Do you need weighted performance? I don't really see how you would ever be able to do an evaluation or analysis of your design without them. Critically evaluate your final solution with reference to your performance criteria. How else are you going to evaluate your solution if you didn't have them there? Like there's a one-liner, it did the thing or it didn't do the thing on test day, but how do you fill the remaining 11 pages, right? It's more complex than that. So I don't know how you would do that without a good set of performance criteria. Where would you, I'm guessing, put the weighted performance criteria? Good point. It gets referred to in a few different spots. It arguably could kind of go in any or in many. Um, I deliberately didn't prescribe this. I think it's going to depend a lot on you as a writer, but also I think it'll depend on the projects quite a lot. Sometimes for some projects, I think it's going to fall out like here really obviously. I think in others it will come out here, and I think in others it'll be really important down here. So I think it depends on your project. Where would Oh, we did that. Should the headings be more detailed than just the word introduction? For instance, introduction to autonomous vehicles for... Oh, absolutely not. No, 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 no. Don't do that. Um, just the word introduction is fine. The only time I would be adding any more to it would be things like description of client, target market, customer, um, as like a subheading or something under that. But no, you don't put a description like this in a title unless you have four different introductions. So if you're writing a 300-page thesis, you might do an introduction to autonomous vehicles for infrastructure monitoring, and an introduction to autonomous vehicles for commercial things, and an introduction to autonomous boats for blah blah blah. Then you would write that type of thing. But this type of title implies there are going to be several other introductions, which you don't have. 24, 25, cool. What's the difference between list of listings and table of contents? A listing is basically a version of code that goes in a report. It's a very specific thing for those who have been doing code. If you haven't been doing code, you shouldn't have a list of listings. Where would you put the competency for mech? I wouldn't, unless it mattered. And if it mattered, it's possibly in assumptions and models. It's possibly in description of design. But I don't know. Why. The better question is this: why do you think you should put the competency in? And then once you know that, I think that'll tell you where to put it. Solution can be evaluated according to objective rather than performance criteria. Nope, it can't be, because an objective is going to be one thing. That's it. There is hundreds of things which influence how we assess your performance on test day, not just one objective. Would you consider to be acknowledgement? Do you need to acknowledge your teammates because of their help and input? It depends. So, we do talk substantially about acknowledgements in the week 10 live stream. So if you haven't watched that, you should. You really should. But yeah, if you had teammates who did heaps of work, you should acknowledge them. If you're using resources from your teammates, data, figures, anything like that, then you should acknowledge them there as well. Could you talk about the material used and justify them in the description of design? Absolutely. Material selection is a huge part of engineering design. Can you put models in that you didn't end up using, encryption models? Why? Maybe if you put them in so you can turn around and say, and this was too complicated, so we didn't use it. But everything, just like everything in your solution should serve a purpose, everything in your report should serve a purpose. And if it doesn't serve a purpose, it's going to do more harm than good having it there. So sometimes you do put in models that you didn't use solely so that you can compare to them and they serve a purpose in that respect. But in general, that superfluous information is a bad thing to include. Yeah, then Zach, that could be worth it. Would software have a costing section? Yeah, software probably would benefit from one. Just to make sure that the software person has thought through some things like, do they need to pay for a staff member? Are there server costs that are required? Those types of things. All right, let's get into doing some revision. These are in no particular order, I don't think. Um, I'm just going to kind of go through them and talk about the stuff that I see. To be honest, guys, I don't know if I'm going to make it through 2 hours of this, alright? So I'm going to make it for as long as I can. And if I have to call it early, I'm sorry, I do. But I'll do what I can, okay? Alright. This is good. This is good. This isn't finished, that's fine. Good. I'm glad you found it helpful. Please make sure you go through and read these, check them, and then tick the boxes, okay? The amount of people who fucked up sections in assessment 2 who just didn't do one of these things. So like these are just here as your sanity checks of here are the 6 really dumb ways to lose heaps of marks. Don't do one of these. Um, so just yeah, make sure you go through your compliance at the end. All right, I put it here for a reason. Table of contents. This is good. Good. Nice. Roman numerals at the start. Excellent. Abstract before the introduction. Excellent. And then Arabic numerals after that. This is perfect. This is wonderful. I love everything about this. This is great. This is great. List of figures yet to come. They don't have it yet, but that's all right. List of tables, list of listings. All right. So I don't know if these are going to be required, but at least they've done their pagination and formatted them out. This probably should be on a new page, but they may not need them, so we'll see. Abstract, they haven't written their abstract yet. This is actually a good thing. You should almost always write your abstract last, although it goes first in the report. It's almost always a good thing to write right at the end. So that's fine. I have no problems with that. They haven't written their acknowledgement section yet. That's fine. Doesn't really matter at this stage. Introduction. All right, I would wipe that and say that's not required. This is good. I'm going to imagine this is mainly stuff from previous, from their assessment 2, which we've already spoken about. So I'm just going to kind of go through kind of quickly. Good, nice figure caption, formatted correctly. Are they using their styles to do this? It looks like they are using their styles to do it. This is perfect. I think this reference is in slightly the wrong spot. I don't actually... In general, you reference at the end of a sentence. So this should actually have the full stop on the other side of it. And should have a space there. References go at the end of sentences. If it was meant to be in relation to this sentence, if that's what they were referencing, it doesn't go at the start. It should go at the end of the sentence. But this is really good. Some things I like about the figure here is that I can still read this text. They haven't made it so the figure is shrunk so much that I can't read the text anymore, which is good. Now, they have a scope here. And at first, I have given this a really quick skim read before. And my first thought when I read this scope was, oh no, there are no numbers in it. But they've actually come and put that into their constraints and objectives. So they do have a whole bunch of numbers in here. They're talking about the size that their turbine has to fit in, the fact that it has to work with this generator. Now, this is something I'm going to come back to in a second. They talk about budgets. They talk about timelines. They talk about wind speeds on which we will test it. They talk about a desired output of greater than 5 volts. This is good. This is all of the numbers that we need to see. This is really, really important. So fantastic, good scope. Let's talk about some things I don't like as much in here. This is an outdated picture. So this picture was appropriate in week 5 when they did their assessment 2. Since then, we gave them updated generators. This person has not updated the figure. They should have. So this is one of these things where you can get caught where you've tried to reuse your own work, your old work, and it's come back to bite you in the ass. So if you are reusing any of your old work, just reread it and make sure it hasn't become outdated. Also, a couple of other things. Figure captions. If you're going to use a comma here to separate figure 1, comma, then this shouldn't be a capital. I would leave it as a capital, and I would make it figure 1 full stop. News article regarding telecommunication reliance. And then maybe a full stop at the end of that sentence as well. Regardless, you want to be consistent with the way in which you do this. We are not consistent here, right? So, did that just not update? No. Oh, maybe they didn't actually modify their style. Now, this could be a result of me putting it on my computer, that it's messed this up. But what you should all make sure you do is come in here to style. So when you insert a figure caption, I'll go right back to the start for those of you who haven't seen this before. I know I did this last time, but I get this question all the time. Insert a caption. Whatever you put in there, okay. And it's going to auto format it into a particular style. If you want to fix that, you go up here to your styles, of which you will have one for normal text, and you can make different ones for your headings and things like that, which it doesn't look like this person has done. They've got one for heading 1, which is good, but it doesn't look like they've got one for their subheadings. Unless, okay, they're using some weird random one for their subheadings by the looks of it. That's fine. What you do is you go into it, so you get one for figure captions, right-click, modify, and come in here and reformat. So it is Times New Roman, but I can't remember what they're supposed to be. 10 and black, I think, is what they're supposed to be. Whatever the document says they're supposed to be. And then it'll format them correctly for you. And if you do this right, it will format them all throughout your entire report for you. So you only have to do it once. This is the point of using styles. You do them once, you do them right, and then you just apply them through your entire document, and your life gets heaps better. So do that. Okay, I'm just going to go back a bunch here because I do want to see what the A, mounting system, B, 3-phase generator. Okay, that's fine. Probably could do a full stop and a full stop just to be super pedantic, but yeah, it's pretty good. Just formatted incorrectly. Cool. I think that was everything. Yep. Sweet. This is good use of a multi-part figure with a part A and a part B. This is excellent. These are two things that are related that they wanted to show, and then they could put them next to each other, and they could save a whole bunch of space and whatnot doing it this way. This is another section I would recommend everybody comes back to. Their assumptions and their models. When you wrote these in week 5 or whatever, you were doing it fairly blind, and you didn't actually know which of these were important and which of them weren't. As you progress through, when you got to your actual testing, you will have probably realized that there's a whole bunch of these things. Let's go. I'm going to skip all the way down to their description of design here. Let's see. Let's see if we can find something in here. So they're talking about their structure, hubs and blades. They are designed to create high torque at low wind speeds. This torque counters opposing frictional force produced by gears, resulting in initial rotation at reasonably low wind speeds. Alright, so this person in their evaluation is wanting to talk about different wind speeds, producing forces, producing torques. They're talking about friction. They're talking about a need for gears, which we don't super understand yet. If we go back up, and that was to just pick one random part out of it, and we go back to here, do we have anything in our assumptions and models about wind speeds? Because if we don't, and particularly low wind speed conditions, so we're talking about withstanding harsh weather conditions, natural disasters. We're talking about some material selection, wind speed and direction. Typical wind patterns and trends such as wind speed and gusts need to be considered to determine the most effective design. That is probably insufficient. Given the fact that this person has gone and made design choices around what their low speed wind has got to do with when it starts up with gearing systems and torque, they probably needed a better introduction to this than that. Now, it may be possible that it's later in here and I haven't quite got to it yet, but this is one of the things you need to come back and revisit. Do I actually have the background that I need in here in order to, when I make my evaluations, those evaluations actually make sense? And I don't know if this person has that. I think they probably need something in here, something in their assumptions and models to talk about what wind speeds actually are and what they are like and which ones are important. Is high important? Is low important? That type of stuff is probably required in their assumptions and models or their background overview. But somewhere up here, that discussion is required, and this sentence is insufficient. So come back and make sure you're doing that, particularly around your assumptions and models section, I think is the bit most people will be required to review. Cool. Cool. These figures are probably not that helpful, or at least they're probably not communicating as much information as the person would like them to, given the amount of space they're taking up. They're not bad figures to have. They are somewhat important. Whether they're worth this much real estate, though, I don't know. And whether all of this tabulated data that no human being's ever going to actually read is that important. Maybe just this graph is the only bit that's actually required, and maybe that could be taken out and talked about in a little bit more depth. Might be more helpful than there's a ton of information here, but I don't know if it's actually conveying any meaning to a reader, or if you just looked at that and went, yep, that's a bunch of numbers, move the fuck on. So if that's the case, yeah, I would look at probably gutting most of this information so that you can distill it down into a clearer point. You might have a good reason for having it. I'm not saying you don't. I'm saying make sure that it's justified. Figure captions that don't actually have captions are something that you need to keep an eye on. Something like this. The design... okay, this came straight from the workshop notes that they were given, which is... This is fine. This is relevant background. Oh, this is probably fine. But I would actually go back and question the validity of putting this in if this is or isn't something you followed. You got told to follow this, but did you actually do so? And if you did, it might deserve a little bit more real estate than you've given it, a bit more of a discussion here. And if you didn't, you should maybe look at taking it out. So given I'm seeing this, I would expect in the description of design to see them talking iteratively about improvements to their design. Let's see. We're going to see this? Doesn't look like we're going to see that. In fact, what we're going to see is their final design split up into a whole bunch of different parts. So they're going to say, we had one total design, it had these sort of 3 or 4 major components, and they're going to deep dive on each of those major components. If that's the way you're going to present your design to me, I would probably actually be talking up here more about like unit testing and integration testing than maybe following this particular design process. So just again, make sure it is all relevant. This is a bunch of background on wind turbines and how they work. This is almost certainly relevant, but again, based on the turbine that you've opted to choose, have you put enough background info into these sections? Up here somewhere. Okay. This is also a potentially risky thing to have done. So, figure 4b. The shape of these blades creates forces called lift and drag, figure 4b. Figure 4 has no parts A and B, and it's a power generator curve. My guess is that what is now figure 6 was originally figure 4 in an earlier version of this, and they've gone and added some more figures up here. They're like, ah, shit, I should put some generator stuff in there. They've done the right thing in terms of updating their figure numbers here, but they haven't updated them in text. Now, there's 2 different approaches here. You can do the automatic way of doing it. So it's absolutely possible to come in here and you can insert a cross-reference. Cross-reference. As long as you named your figures, like you put proper figure captions in, only label a number, which this person has, they've done the right thing, insert. So you can get it to automatically put a figure 6 cross-reference in here. And yeah, the font changes and it's super annoying, so you have to go back and fix the font. But you can, this will auto-update. So if you then go and put another figure in up here, or you delete these 2 things because one of these because you realized you didn't need it, and then this becomes, figure 3 stays, figure 4 disappears, this becomes the new figure 4, this becomes the new figure 5, this can automatically update. You have to tell it to, but it will automatically update throughout your entire document. And that's really, really convenient. It stops this exact problem from happening. However, if you delete this figure, it stays there until you do something like try and print it or export it as a PDF, which everybody should do before they upload, because there's a whole bunch of things that it makes really obvious. And if I go and find that same page, error, reference source not found, because figure 6 doesn't exist anymore. And now see, this did update, but it didn't update in text until I exported it as a figure. It's just how Word does it. So the auto update thing is really, really great unless you fuck it up, and then it does this all through your document, and it can be problematic. So there's 2 ways around this. I use the auto update because on large documents it's virtually impossible not to. But what I do before I upload anything is one of the steps in my proofreading process is I export the document as a PDF, and then I get the PDF and I Control F for the word, error, exclamation mark. Is it not error, exclamation mark? Why did E? Oh, okay, whatever. And then I go and find all of the instances of this, and I can be like, cool, I've screwed up in my document on page 5. Go to page 5 of my document, and go and fix up whatever I got wrong. So that's fine. You can absolutely do that. And if you are trying to do any of this automatically, you should. The other option is that you can just do it all manually. The problem with doing it all manually is You've got to make sure you don't miss a single one of these. And it can take forever to go and find them all. So what I do if I am doing it manually is I Control F for the word figure, and I go and find every single use of figure in my document, and I make sure that I haven't fucked one of them up. So you can figure out which one you think is quicker. It depends on length of document, basically. The longer your documents, the more automated it is, the better. The shorter your documents, the more manual it is, generally the better. This is another risky one. Now, they had highlighted this themselves. They're referring to something that's on page 6. This is absolutely something to come back and check. Using yellow as a highlighter to come back and find things is not a bad idea, but you'd be astounded at the amount of reports I read that have still got things that have very clearly been highlighted in them, and somebody has very clearly never found them again. So what I prefer to do instead of highlighting is I pick a symbol I don't use for anything else. So curly brackets, for example, are not something I basically ever use, but if you use curly brackets, pick another symbol you never use. And then that's just the thing that I Control F for at the end, is my curly brackets, and these are all the things I need to come back to and fix. I find it's much more reliable than highlighting, because I can Control F for curly brackets, whereas I can't Control F for shit that I highlighted and have maybe forgotten about. Okay. Yeah, so a bunch of stuff there. Equations. Now, this is one of the things that I'm planning on making a video for this, but I'll show you all right now. So this is not the correct way to do equation numbers. What I'm about to show you is the absolute hackiest thing on the face of the earth. But the way that you're supposed to do equation numbers is they're supposed to appear next to the equation and be right aligned. And the equation is supposed to be center aligned. So how do you do that? Because you can't just like put this in and then tab across or something, because it messes everything up. So how do you get on one line something center aligned and something right aligned? You insert a table that's 3 cells wide. You get your equation, you copy it, and you paste it into the table. Then you get equation 1, you copy it, and you paste it in over here. And then you can format the cells in the table differently. So if I just highlight the stuff on the right and I right align it, it will right align it. Whereas this will stay center aligned. You can also actually, if you want to get nice and fancy, you can right align and then you can actually center this within the frame. But so that one there you go, centers it in the cell vertically and aligns it to the right. So all of that goes away. And then to get rid of the table, you just come up to your table design, go to borders, and go no border. And then it all disappears. And now you get an equation that looks exactly like it should, centered in the middle of the page with your equation number to the right. I often don't use the full word equation. I'm a fan of EQ. Some people will just use E. I like EQ.1. Sometimes people will just put nothing. They'll just put the number. I don't love that as much, but all of these options are technically acceptable. So I prefer EQ dot. But you do you there. Now you have an equation number. So that's the correct way to do that. If you're going to put a bunch of equations one after the other, this actually can be really helpful. Well, it's not helpful, it's never good, but you can just put a bunch of cells in that table, a bunch of rows, and then you can put a whole bunch of maths in, and it's actually not that bad. It's not as bad as people kind of think it is, putting maths in. It's not great. It's not great. But once you know the table trick, it only takes a couple of seconds. And if I wanted to do this again, I could just copy and paste, and I can get my formatting down here, and then I can copy and paste and copy and paste. Oh, something weird happened there. It's not a right aligned, but I can fix that easily enough. So once you've done it once in your document, formatting all of your other equations is super duper easy. So that's how you put your maths in. This was another option this person went for, and they went for this layout. I don't hate this. I know some people would hate this. A lot of people would hate this. I don't hate this. I kind of like this, to be honest. I think this is nice, but bear in mind, not everybody does. They've done the right thing by making sure their table caption is above their table, which is where it is supposed to be. So that's nice. Cool, cool, cool. All right. Now, before I get into performance criteria, I'm going to have a quick scan of the chat because I'm aware I haven't been reading it. Hey, Alex. There are no more hard copy submissions, so we don't get funny submissions like that anymore. Using we is fine. Using we is sometimes fine. It can be acceptable, but you got to be really careful because people start using we and then they tend to drift into pretty poor language as a result after that. So somebody who starts out trying to just use we often ends up becoming really quite informal with their language and they end up writing pretty poorly. So you can, there's nothing wrong with it as long as you don't let your standard continue to slip and as long as you use it as the royal we and never ever as like the inclusionary we or exclusionary we, however it works. How do I make an anonymous acknowledgement? I have a teammate that calculated the final pricing. We covered that pretty extensively in the week 10 stream. So it might be worth just that. The week 10 stream is fully timestamped. So just go there, have a quick look at that acknowledgements section part at the end of this. It should get you out of trouble. If one of the figures used was a table, does it still need to have no vertical lines? What? I don't understand. Is it a figure or is it a table? Oh yeah, don't ever just like screenshot a table and put it in. If it's a table, put it in as a table. Had I had Roman numerals? Go watch the Word 101 video. It's covered explicitly in there. Can you place that additional table information in the appendix in reference to it? I think we're talking about this information up here. That absolutely is info that could go into an appendix. That's a good call. This could absolutely go into an appendix. And then you could actually possibly put it in a way that was even more readable because it could be much bigger. Like they could be full page figures at that stage. And that might be a better way to do it. Can you please show how to add subheadings like they have? It isn't in the Word 101 video for the table of contents. So the way in which you do your headings and subheadings, if you want them to automatically appear in your table of contents, is, I mean, they've just got their top tier headings. They've just got heading 1 appearing in their table of contents. But if they had actually used heading 2 for their subheadings, so I'm going to take their beautifully, nicely formatted subheadings and ruin them here. Actually, I don't need to do that. Times 14 italics. All right. See this? Heading 2. I'm going to change this style of this to be heading 2. And change the style of this to be heading 2. Then this would be 2, and this would be 3. And now it depends on what type they put in. There we go. So I went update table and I updated the entire table and I hit OK. And now it has the main heading and then it has the subheadings in there as well and the subheadings. Now, when you put your table of contents in, there's a bunch of options you can choose about like how many headings deep it goes and stuff like that. So as long as you used your headings up here, then you should be fine. Now, you obviously, the word default styles are not what you want. They're this shit, but you can just modify these so that they are what you want them to be. Times 14 italics and black, and then okay, and then it updates that for you. And this was the sub heading, so it's heading 3, modify, we wanted that to be times, I can't remember what this person has, I'm going to say it was 12 italics and black, but whatever they had, and then it puts that in for you. I've obviously lost their numbers here, but you can, ordering can kind of be important. So what you should do, the first thing you should do is reformat the headings, the styles. That's the best place to start with your document. And then you do the numberings and stuff like that. So I hope that helps. Use styles, basically, is how you do it. Word revolves around styles. Use them. They will make your life better. How much of the first report will be usable? We just sort of went through that. It depends. I would be looking at everything I'd written in the first report and making sure that it's worth keeping. You could use all of it if you wanted to. I doubt that you would, though. On Canvas, it says the task is due in 4 days. Yeah, officially it's due on Friday, and I'm giving you an extension to Monday. So it's due Friday, I'm giving you an extension to Monday. I am going to try and actually put that in as an official extension, but I have to do that for every one of you manually, so yeah, don't stress about it. Should figures appear after the relevant body of text? Yes, they should. Should text continue above or below it? No, text almost always should just be above a figure. So relative velocity of a wing is the velocity moving through the air plus the air velocity. It can be calculated at different points throughout the length of the wing, blah, 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 blah. As seen in figure 9, aerofoil velocity plus air velocity at head equals relative velocity. So this is perfect. They've referenced that, they've spoken about it first, and then they've given me the cross-reference to it, and then the figure has appeared below it. That is the correct way to do it. Sometimes you go away from that, but you only ever go away from that if you have a super duper good reason for going away from that. Okay, so performance criteria. This is a reasonably nice performance criteria. It's basically a whole page. It's got a point and then some reasoning around it. This is good. This is absolutely something that everybody needs to come back to and look at evaluating their design on this performance criteria and whether they basically agree with this, if they disagree with this, and most importantly, if they think it was substantial enough to actually evaluate the success of their solution or not. If there was other people in the room who came and sold their design on a set of parameters that you didn't really consider, you should look at going and putting those back into your performance criteria. Now, maybe you put them in and you give them fairly low rankings. Maybe somebody stood up and sold their thing on aesthetics, and you think that was just a complete waste of time. You should still have aesthetics in your performance criteria to acknowledge that it is a thing and some people care about it, but in this case, you're going to downgrade how important you think it is. So making sure that if you listen to all of your peers and what they were pitching on and whatnot, that you've got all of this stuff more or less covered. Be really careful with performances as a criteria here. I assume it works. That's a constraint. It did its job or it didn't do its job is a constraint. And if it didn't do its job, it didn't do its fucking job. There's no point putting it in as a performance criteria. It works or it doesn't. The performance criteria is about all of the things you can put on a flexible scale. Now, that being said, if we look at the wind turbine project, you can say that it had to create 5 watts, which is what it had to do, and that's a constraint. However, the ability to generate electricity at low wind speeds is kind of an extension on that. So that is absolutely worth keeping in here. It's just you've got to make sure that you've separated out the constraint from the performance criteria. Efficient convert and efficiently convert kinetic energy into electrical energy with minimal energy loss, such as friction gears. See, this to me, I think, is just worthless. You you get an amount of power out at the end. It doesn't matter. This doesn't actually add value here. What they should be talking about is the minimum wind speed at which they could obtain 5 volts is a really useful thing to be able to do. Maybe the maximum power they were capable of safely extracting from the wind, and what that would be helpful for. If you could get to 10 volts, can you then say now you can charge 2 phones at once? Or, I don't know, something else like that. But yeah, be careful. Look at your use of performance in performance criteria, because it's meant to assess all of the other things that it was supposed to do. It's meant to just achieve the constraints. Stuff like reliability is fantastic. Ease of maintenance is fantastic. Safety is fantastic. Be careful with safety. So many people stood up in their pitch and said safety to me, and I tore them apart for it. Because they had exposed spinning blades, because they had the exposed electrical connectors that could short, because they were a robot project and they said safety to me, and they never had a forward-facing sensor that could stop if a pedestrian walked in front of them. Like, so many people stood up and said safety when they had designs that were very clearly unsafe, had exposed screws that were just poking out and being sharp. All sorts of different stuff. So, yeah, be really careful with safety. More people did more harm than good to themselves when they said safety to me over last week. So be really careful about it. Ease of installation, yep, that's a good one. Adaptability. Variable conditions, ability to rotate into various wind directions and speeds and operate in all natural disasters. Okay, I don't know if adaptability is what I would call that. I think that's probably misnamed. But sure, the ability to deal with varying wind conditions is absolutely important here. And then I like that they've taken costs and they've split it into initial and long term. That's a good thing. I would probably prefer them to have put a little bit more thought into what their maintenance and repair costs might actually look like, but good that they at least thought of that. So this is absolutely a place you should come back to and you should put some real brain cells to. Whether you put it in here or whether it's something that comes out when you start doing your justification. This is their description, evaluation of the design. So it might mainly come out a little bit later for you in the report when you're doing this evaluating, but how are you going to evaluate it? How are you going to decide whether it's good or whether it's bad, whether it did its job well or not? How did it stack up against other teams? What would you do different in the future? That should be highly based on your performance criteria. So, just getting back into description of design, the way that this person has decided to split theirs up, and I don't hate this, is they do a bit of an overall introduction, which is good. That's probably what it should be, a bit of a description, big picture. This is what we made. Image, and what they're missing here that they don't have, but they're yet to put in. Image of turbine with leader lines pointing to components. This would be a really, really, really nice image to have. I think that this is a great idea. If you're going to do a big overall picture, like big picture overview of your solution, and then put in an image, put heaps of lines pointing to different stuff. This is this, this is this, this is this. Fantastic. Just make sure that that image is good. Like, a really nice high quality image here will do wonders for you. A shitty image where you can't really make anything out, it's probably not going to do more harm than good. It's probably always going to be helpful to you, but it could do a lot. This could be like a game-changingly good image right here. So really, really pay some attention to this particular part. because it's going to make everything else you do much better. Be aware of your units spacing. Space goes between your numbers and your units. The overall cost to get this to final design was 207, and to reproduce design would cost this, as seen in table 1. If taken to a larger scale... Okay, so this is another danger. Table 1, we've already seen table 1, right? It was all the way up here somewhere. This is table 1. So they definitely don't mean table 1, but that's okay. Do we have another table? Doesn't look like we have another table. If taken to a larger scale, it would cost this. Further details, see Appendix 1. And then we have a costing section? I don't understand. I don't know what was happening here. I would take all of this cost discussion and fuck it off into the costing section. I would do it once. I would do it right. I'd do it in detail. Yeah. I think having a costing section for this particular way of splitting this report up is a good thing. I would do it once and I would do it right. So this is the big picture overview of what you have in your design. The nitty-gritty of costs comes next. That's fine. And then they go through and they break down each part of their solution. So base and tower, nacelle, hub and blades. This is cool. They can go into detail. They can put pictures in. Bad blades, average blades, very good. This is nice. They're going to have comparisons. This is a cool way of doing this. Balsa, nacelle, second nacelle, final base. So this is them making improvements as they go. That's sweet. That's a really nice, cool way of breaking this up. I like this a lot. And then they're going to come in and do their evaluation, and they're going to follow the same process. So they're going to do a big picture overview. This is just their notes for what to write. But they're going to do a big picture overview evaluation. Then they evaluate their base. Then they evaluate their stem bit, their tower, essentially. They evaluate their nacelle, their blades, and their hubs. And then they hit their conclusions. What this probably needs is, at the end of this, is an overall evaluation. So, cool. That was all of the bits. How does it all come together? Did all of the bits come together in the way that we wanted it to? Now, obviously, this person hasn't finished, and that might just still be coming. But putting together a big picture, all right, I've talked about all the parts in isolation. Did they actually solve the initial problem? Should somebody buy this thing? Is it worth it? Is it not worth it? So bringing it all together at the end is kind of the only other thing that I think this is really missing. And when they do so, a bit of a reflection against some of their performance criteria would be really, really helpful. How did they end up stacking up against all of these particular things? But overall, this is looking pretty good. I like the layout and the structure of this. The work that they're recycling from assessment 2 absolutely needs to be looked at to make sure it's actually relevant and actually helping them. They haven't done their reference list yet. They haven't done any appendices yet. Cool. It's a good start. It's a good start. With the UML diagram, it's fairly sizable, half a page, does that matter? No, sometimes UML diagrams, if they tell a good story, is perfectly fine for them to be huge. So you should absolutely consider, whenever you're putting your figures in, how much real estate you're giving them. And are they of value to you? So this image of the turbine with leader lines pointing to components, if that took up if that took up an entire page, if it was a full page figure, probably worth it. I would probably burn if I could get one nice one that showed every single part of the turbine and all the bits of it working, and somebody said you have to burn a whole page to put this in, I'd happily burn a page for that. Whereas, as we've already discussed, these figures, which take up over half a page, probably are not worth the real estate. So you can use small figures, you can use huge figures. The question for you should be, is it worth the real estate? Often it is, but make sure that you've put enough effort into getting enough useful information transferred in it. And be aware, putting more data on a page does not necessarily equal more useful transmission of that data. This has too much data on a page, and so it got lost in the noise. For the robot project, if I have a figure of the track in scope, but also talk about it in the description of design, is it okay to reference it, or should I put the figure in again? Yeah, good call. It depends. Repeating figures is not common. Repeating figures is quite rare. Normally you just reference them. Can kind of suck though. Actually, there is a robot one that I think does potentially a good job of this. So I'm going to hold on to that question because I think one of the robot ones I have to review actually does look. Is it? Are we going to get that lucky? Is it literally the next one in the pile? I'm not going to spend as long on these subsequent ones. I spent a lot of time on the first one because it gave me a lot to talk about, but I'm going to skim these other ones looking for more specific stuff. Okay, it's not this one. Is it this one then? Do you not want to open? Open. Piece of junk. Alright. Okay. So this was the robot track. And they've got this in where? Where is this? Whoa, holy wall of text. So this is in evaluation. Conclusions. Is it this one? Did I get 3 robot reports? We might spend a bit of time on this one talking about figures and the one that I just had open before. Okay. Yeah, okay. So this person doesn't use it twice. I thought they did. So some options here. This person has basically repeated a figure 3 times, but they've not done a great job of making a multi-part figure. But they have repeated a figure. They've just highlighted different places on it. So this is quite nice. Conceptually, I really like this. The execution leaves a little bit to be desired, but we can talk about that. But this could absolutely be worth doing. And then if you wanted to put an image of the whole track in kind of unmarked, I could absolutely see having this figure in early in your in your report. Maybe in like the scope section or something like that. I could see this belonging in there. And then having like this in your evaluation section or the description of your design section, depending on how you decided to break it up. So repeating these figures could be helpful. You rarely exactly repeat a figure. You almost always reference it. In long documents, though, that can be really annoying. Now, I wouldn't call a 25-page report necessarily long. It's kind of middle length. In a 300-page thesis, I could absolutely see repeating a figure. I could see that being really helpful. Here, I would probably just cross-reference it. The nice thing about when you properly insert cross-references is they do hyperlink. So a reader can actually just click on a figure 2 or whatever, and they will jump to the correct spot. All right, so I'm going to go through this one I'll just answer these last two questions. If we had to come see you for extra parts and components, does that count as additional costs? Only if you ended up putting more on your bot than you started with. If it was just a replacement because something broke, probably not. So a figure that shows where each screen takes the user and the overall process of interactions with the user in it is worth it. It might be worth it. It depends how much useful information you can convey with that, Zach. Okay, let's have a look at this robot one. First things first. Let's go actual first things first. This is currently titled ENGG1500 Final Report. Auto recovered. So I hate everything about this. One, it's titled incorrectly, and B, you needed to get an auto recovery. So I would suggest right now, absolutely everybody goes and makes a redundant save backup copy of their report just in case something goes haywire and you don't need to rely on Windows Auto Recovery, Microsoft Auto Recovery, because it's actually surprisingly good, but it's still not a thing to be banking anything on. So make sure you're saving redundant backup copies. You don't just have one version of your fucking file. Every time you do a big chunk of work on it, you save a new version of it so that you have 4 different previous versions you can go back to if something completely explodes. All right? You should also probably look at making a redundant save of it on a different via a different storage mechanism. So if you've got everything saved on a cloud, you should save one locally. If you've got everything saved on your laptop, save something on a cloud. The dumb but super reliable option of this that we have used for forever is you just email it to yourself. Just every now and then, when you finish working on it for 8 hours or something, save a redundant copy and email it to yourself. And that way it's in the email server. And you can always get to it from there, even if your laptop dies or your Microsoft Office kicks you out and you can't get access to it anymore or something like that. So everybody should go and back their goddamn report up. And at the end of every day, back your goddamn report up. Also, name it correctly. Name it correctly now so that you have it named correctly. Even if, it's the correct name _1, _2, _3 as you go through versions. At least it has the correct information in the file name. It's annoying for me to find you then, but it's not awful. This is awful. If you upload it like this, I have no way of figuring out who the fuck you are. So don't do that. Obviously, you were given a title page, so I don't know why you burnt energy making another title page. Go use the one that you were given. You have page numbers, but they should be Roman numerals at this stage. They shouldn't be Arabic. They should only start being Arabic once we hit the introduction. They should also restart from 1, like the previous report did. For some reason, you have the word contents here. I don't know why. So let's get rid of that. It's doing this. Yeah, okay. Cool. Okay. Details on client is a strange wording. Details on client is a peculiar way of titling that. And I would less talk about them being the client, and I would more talk about this being the problem at this stage. Constraint of the project is the robot is that the robot. So what I'd suggest to this person is that they read this out loud. There's a whole bunch of different ways that you can do this. But the way that I would do this, if I was this person and I maybe struggled with getting my English to flow, which I do, Dylan struggles with this quite a lot as well. Copy, go to Google, go read my text. You guys won't be able to see that, will you? Read my text. There are smarter ways of doing this. You can automatically do this in Word now. There's like 100 ways of doing this. But just really simple and really dumb. Read my text to me. Yeah, sure. Whoever.
Good evening.
I don't care. Oh, go away. Find any text-to-speech reader, paste your text in there, and hit play.
The constraint of the project is the robot must be.
And you will immediately hear it say, is the robot, and be like, what the hell was I writing? So, yeah, if this is a thing that you do commonly, you struggle a little bit to get your flow right, and that happens to all of us, don't stress, it happens to me all the time as well. Copy, paste it into a read my text, and then sit there and listen to it. I think you would benefit from that pretty massively. I would also read this through in terms of you're explaining this to somebody who, you're explaining this to somebody who doesn't really know what's going on. This is a very abrupt way of writing. And I don't know if this is a very nice way of actually communicating this to another human being. If you were to speak this to somebody, is this the way in which you'd say it? If not, maybe you should humanize your language a little bit more. This would be very, very hard to read. It's very like a series of instructions as opposed to something that actually reads like a report should read. Okay. I don't know why this is figure 1.1. It doesn't really make any sense to me. This table doesn't have a caption. These figures are all, well, they're not all different sizes, but they're kind of all different sizes. You need to standardize these things. If you're going to make something like this, where you're comparing basically a whole bunch of stuff to each other, you need to standardize it. So all of these figures need to be made the same width. You just come up to picture format and you can just put a width in here. So 2.75, 3.1, like what the fuck? Let's make them all be the same size. I also don't understand the alignment here. There's all these different spacings going on, which is really confusing. I don't get this. Oh, did you do some weird... Oh, you did. Don't do this. Don't text wrap your figures in any way other than inline with text ever. It is the only text wrapping you should ever use. Ever. So don't do that, because that's one of the reasons all of your figures look so weird, because you put them in ever so slightly different places and it just looks terrible. What you probably want to do instead is put all of these in line with text. Go into all your picture formats, make them all be the same size. We're doing 2.75, right? Now, this one's a little different, and I acknowledge that, so I would see what it looks like at 2.75. It probably looks fine. All of your pictures are on a white background, except one. So what you do in that case is you get your encoder, and you put it on a white piece of paper, and you take a photo of it. It won't be exactly the same look as these, but it will be pretty close. So I would take a new photo of my encoder there, just on a white sheet of paper. All right. But you do this to all of them, and then once they're all the same size, I would also come through on all of these, and I would standardize the way in which I do this formatting, which I would probably go center center. Maybe center center. Yeah. So that they all look nice and consistent and the same. Okay? It's really important that if you're going to do something like this, you put some effort into making them actually look consistent. Otherwise, yeah, it will detract from what you're trying to say. You also need a figure caption. Figure captions, well, you need a table caption. Insert caption. It's not a figure, it is a table, and it should go above. So, okay, and then you can put your table caption in, whatever you want. As spoken about before, make sure you reformat your caption formatting so that it's the correct way. And I would also go away from using APA referencing style. APA referencing style, particularly if you're the type of person who puts things in brackets, then you've got your references inside brackets as well. And you've got this. Like, this is a really difficult thing for another human being to read and have to deal with all of this. So I would just not use APA. I would use IEEE in this case. Come on. And then suddenly this isn't so horribly annoying to read all the time. Cool. I think we've spoken about that at length. Okay, here's another thing that you're doing that's just gonna cause you endless trouble. Don't use a whole bunch of enters, carriage returns in a case like this. Use page breaks. Okay? Because otherwise what invariably happens, what had happened to this person, is they'd put in what probably was the right amount of carriage returns, the right amount of enters when they'd started, but then they went and wrote something else up here and something else got moved, and see, this has been moved. What you want to do instead is use page breaks. And that way, as somebody changes the amount of things above or below, it doesn't make a difference. Okay? So use your page breaks. This is another thing. So if you're not in the robot project, for example, and you try and read this sentence, figure 2.1 shows how my code is running with green being a sensor giving a value, and blue being a motion of the robot. This is okay. So this is a UML diagram like we were talking about before. Conceptually, I love this UML diagram. That's fine. It's this sentence. The value of the IR sensors in the analog pin is calculating using this formula, where X is the distance from the center and WN is the sensor data, blah, blah. What does this mean? Like, this is such a complicated thing to have introduced. This is a weighted average sum of a n sensor array to return a single value. Why? What are you doing here? This is, for somebody who doesn't know your project, such a complicated thing to be introducing so quickly. I would try and take a couple of steps back and maybe put some wording around what this is. Not just with maths, but just with words around what it is and why it is the way that it is. Slow this down a little bit. Explain what's going on to somebody who doesn't know the robot project. I know you've introduced an IR sensor before, but you haven't talked here about what an analog or a digital response would be. You haven't talked about how they vary or anything like that. So just the step in information intensity is just a lot here. So I would slow this down and I would put some more human language in it. I mean, this description of design is allowed to be several pages long, right? So yeah, I think you're just trying to sum it up way too much. Cool. Cool. Final design. I don't understand why this is black and white. It doesn't make any sense to me because it's then got color on it down here. So it's really weird. Also, I don't really understand these dimensions. Like, why do I care that the wheels are 65 in diameter and this is 25 in diameter? What does that tell me as a reader? This is similar to before when we were talking about that superfluous information that had been provided. You shouldn't have any information here that's not relevant. And I don't, and maybe somewhere we're going to see why having wheels that are 25 millimeters thick and 65 mils in diameter is important, but I don't currently see why this is important. So I would take a lot of that out. The other thing that you need to do here is make a multi-part figure in PowerPoint. Okay, so come into PowerPoint, import the pictures that you want, and actually make this properly. Don't just hack it together in Word using crappy text wrapping. come in here and actually lay it out properly, the way that you want it, and set all your dimensions right so that you don't end up with these two things being different heights. Like, that's just not how you want to do this. If you want them to be the same height, you can. That's fine. How high is it? And then this is a different height again. It's also not this width. Like, there's probably a better way to do this. Either make it, and I mean, how does it look if we do this? Okay, it's a little bit too big. But a figure like this could be really nice. And then you put your A's, your B's, your C's on it, and then you export it as one nice figure. Something like that could be really, really good. And then you can put that in here. You don't do figure captioning like this, okay? You'd import it as one figure, and like the person in the previous report had done, who did a really, really good job of their figures, actually, of their multi-part figure captioning. Where did it go? Steal from this person. So where do they have some multi-part figures? That one's actually not great because it's too small. I thought they did a good job of this. Maybe it's somewhere later that we see a better job. Here's a decent job of it. So they've got their multi-part figures. These were 4 separate photos that they stitched together in, I'm guessing, PowerPoint, and they put their labels on them, and then they tell me with one figure caption what they all are. I'm pretty sure they do this somewhere else as well. Maybe they don't. Huh. Okay. Maybe I'm misremembering. Ah, here. They do a really nice job of it here. Parts A and B. Yes, they need to fix up what part B is. But this is the correct way of doing figure captioning. So steal from this person, do what they did. They did it right. Be careful with this. I don't know why there are brackets here. I would get rid of those. And I'd be really careful with using an X here. You can put in a times by symbol, and you really should. That's the correct way to do that. Make sure you're putting spaces between your numbers and your units. 3D is more often than not capitalized, but don't do this. As shown in the figures above, so this is where you need to get your figure numbering right, and then you would say as shown in figure 5. Okay. Not really sure what the value of your costing section is here. And again, in danger. If you came back in and added another bunch of paragraphs to your costing section, you're going to mess all of your pagination up, right? So this is why we don't put in a bunch of them. We put in page breaks. Okay, if you're going to rate cost as highly as you have, this section probably needs to be longer than it is, and you probably need to put more details in here. I don't know where you got numbers like the final cost was less than $50. The Picos alone cost like 35 bucks. So I'm not sure where these numbers are coming from. So if you know these numbers accurately, you need to put them in accurately. And if you're making them up, you need to be much more careful than this and probably not say that cost is an 8 out of 10 in that case. Be careful. Generally, don't use abbreviations. They're generally a bad thing to have. Let's have a look at the future recommendations. If the robot was to continue its progress, there are 2 main things that should be considered. First is the problem with the grey line. To solve this, this would be a counter, and if it moves forward, loses the line, go back, and if it happens X times in a time frame, check line 60 millimeters in front to see if it was there, and if not, go back. This would hypothetically fix the grey line issue without losing the ability to constantly stay on the black line. Holy sentence, Batman. Alright, so again, put this in a read my text to me and you'll realize that this has become what we call a run-on sentence, where it just sort of keeps going and going and going. This needs to be at least 3 sentences, is my guess. Although this is all hypothetical as the team didn't have time to perform these changes. Well, yeah, it's a future recommendation. We know that the team didn't do that. So I guess you're trying to say you don't necessarily know whether this would work or not. The second thing would be to find a better method for selecting the exit on a roundabout where it's currently favors one type of turn, either left or right, during the whole track, but if a function on favoring straight, left, and right, depending on what roundabout it has entered, the user would have more control on more complex open world systems instead of sample one shown in the figures. Again, sentences. So in this case, this isn't a terrible future work section, but it would be much better if it was a little bit more detailed, if this maybe had a UML diagram to go with it, and if this maybe had an actual way of doing this, then that would be probably a more useful future recommendations. I don't understand why the competency task is in here. I don't know what value it adds. I also don't know why you have a results section. You weren't asked for a results section, so I'm not sure what the purpose of this is. Similar here. Does this come up again? Is this data that's going to be helpful to us later? If not, it shouldn't be here. Now, I could actually see why this could be helpful. This absolutely could go in the models and assumptions, but I don't quite understand what it's doing here. How they did on the track is kind of cool. Like, I don't mind this way of representing it, but you've got to put this in PowerPoint and make it a single image so that they're not all different sizes. And then you can make them A, B, and C, and then you can talk about what they are there. And then you have a conclusion. We haven't done a conclusion yet, so I'll give this a read and I'll give my thoughts on it as a conclusion. The ENGG1500 robot project had successfully demonstrated its ability to navigate in a semi-open environment and overcoming the obstacles such as the hallways, garages, and roundabouts, while also reliably follows the line. Okay, the project didn't. The project was Dylan giving the robot project out. Your solution to the project is what did these things. So you want to be clear there. Also, Eng gets capital letters. This indicates the effectiveness of the team in creating a prototype able to be scaled up and produced to investigate open world environments for Caudal without the need for intense human interaction. Okay, that's a decent concluding statement. Key findings from the project include the robot's ability to reliably follow a predetermined path, avoiding collisions, and accurately park within the garage, the implementation of the IR sensors to track lines, and the ultrasonic sensors to detect obstacles proved effective in navigating various track configurations, including curves, bends, hallways, and dead ends. Good. That's a very good conclusion statement. It's good. I like it. The objectives were both met and exceeded when the performance was well and the cost was so low, allowing further improvements in its data analysis without having to go over budget. Don't love this one as much. This project also gave an insight in engineering protocols of both problem solving and effective communication among peers. Don't love this as much. Unless this was relevant, like what engineering protocols were implemented. If you say, we used an iterative, via application of an iterative design process, blah, blah, blah was achieved, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with talking about the methodologies that you used, but be explicit with what they are. how did you do effective communication, and why is it relevant? Is it due to the team's rigorous meeting schedule and meticulous note taking? A very coherent design was achieved. Then that's relevant information. But this statement in isolation, I don't think is actually helping you. In conclusion, this project highlights the possibility for autonomous robotics in real-world situations and set a baseline for improved robotics in the future. Again, don't love this as much. I think this is a I'm going to change the world statement, and I don't think it belongs that much. This is fantastic. Maybe channel a little bit more of this type of energy as you write the rest. Okay. Bibliography should not be called a bibliography. It should be called references or reference list. And Ash Kirkland was not the sole author of Lab 1. I also don't think it was called just Lab 1. I would look at how you've done these, because they, come on, where are you? There you are. Oh, by the way, hold on, I should have explained this. So you see when your references does this stupid thing here, it's because this is actually a table with a hidden vertical line in it, and you need to grab that hidden vertical line and drag it to the side, and then they'll format correctly. When you inserted your references there, did you actually... I mean, you must have gone up and added them in this way, right? And actually added a citation in? Yeah. I'm just so confused. Add new source. Okay, so to whoever... Whenever you do this, the way in which you put them in, you go insert citation, you go add new source, whatever source it was, a report, a document, or whatever. If you don't know, like if there's something that you absolutely just have no idea, miscellaneous is fine. When you go to put the author in, you go here and you go edit. Last name, Cass Kelly. First, Dylan. Middle, T. Add. And then if, say, Ash, who is this person who's being referred to here, A. Kirkland. Kirkland. Ash. I don't know Ash's middle initial, but that's fine. And you continue to add your authors in like that. And then you put a title. You put the year of publication. And University of Newcastle. Okay. And that creates a reference. And now, if I update this, hopefully it will have it in there for me. See, and then it should format and it should look like this. Okay? It should have all of your authors in it. And it should format out like this. So when you're referring to your labs, they, I know for a fact, have more than one author. They have many authors. So that's probably something you need to look at there. Cool. All right, we got to the end of that one. And just looking at questions. We did that one. Oh. When noting our costs, should we reference the website for the company we brought materials from, e.g. Bunnings? You could. You absolutely could. I think that would be probably the right thing to do. Yeah, I would agree with that. And yeah, no, I would just straight up agree with that. I just think that's the right thing to do. Cool. All right. Is there anything specific that people would like me to go through? I do have another couple of reports here. I'm just trying to think if there was anything in them I wanted to highlight specifically. I'm going to do these last couple really quickly, just to see if there's anything that I haven't spoken about that's worth going over. These are really nice figures. I absolutely think this person needs to come back to their models and assumptions and talk about actual amount of rain that comes off the car park and stuff like that. Maybe some things about their initial prototypes making the water dirtier than cleaner. I don't know, maybe they have some of that in here. But particularly the Enviro project finds a whole bunch of stuff out as they're going through that they didn't realize at the start. And I think that really needs to be expanded probably in the models and assumptions part. Nice photos, early prototypes. Okay, so this person has taken us through their design in a little bit of a different way from others, from the one that we saw before. It's still going to give us a bit of a big picture overview. But then they go through this almost more chronologically, going through a series of prototypes. Prototype 1, Prototype 2, Prototype 3 being their final one. Oh, Sam Murphy. We'll talk about that in a second. And then they've come through and given us a whole bunch of costs in different tables, which I quite like that as well. So this is just a different approach. I don't mind this approach at all. I think that we looked at that wind turbine one where it took their solution and they broke their final design down into a series of parts and spoke about them like that. And this one, we're talking about kind of the iterative design where we got to the solution. Two very different ways of tackling this, but I quite like both of them if done well. And here is a way for somebody to very quickly get 0. I would suggest in this particular report, you just don't use comments for any reason. Because there was maybe 10 people in the last report who just got 0 because they left comments in and then they got flagged for not being anonymous. Just don't use comments. Just don't do it. In other reports and when you're working collaboratively, yeah, sure, use comments all you like. They're a really cool and really useful tool. In this report, just don't do it. The risk is just not worth having, okay? They did a great job. They named their file correctly. They've been excellent, but yeah, that's just not worth doing. I don't know where their performance criteria is. I haven't seen it. It may be in here. I obviously went through this super duper quickly. But I don't know how they want me to evaluate their project. But my guess is that they really want me to evaluate it on cost, considering they've given so much real estate to all of these different cost analyses. So I hope wherever they do a performance criteria, they really up the importance. Oh, here we go. This is kind of cool. Okay, so they went through and they did do cost, which is good. Importance for client score, weighted score. So they've got their weightings. They've got how well their design scored, and then they've got, all right, how well their design scored as a function of their weighting. This is pretty cool. I like this. I like this quite a lot. Now, it's how they scored it, and I don't necessarily know if I would score it the same way, but this is kind of cool. I wouldn't mind some more detail on all of these things. I think they would benefit from having more detail in all of this and more discussion. Yeah, more detail, more discussion around this rather than just dot points in the table. If each one of these became a paragraph, I think that would be worth including. Okay, cool, pretty cool. For the appendices, should we label them Appendix A, B, and C? Yeah, absolutely. And A, B, and C is common. So chapters are normally numbered, and appendices are normally given appendice A, B, C. Appendix A, B, and C. Cool. Cool. Just having a skim through here. Page numbers need to be fixed up. They've got the multi-level heading list. That's very nice, except it's all in Calibri for reasons which I don't understand. Now, this is probably because Word automatically changed the font of this when you put them in. That's fine. Just make sure the last thing you do, Control A, and go and make it all Times New Roman. And then it'll update everything, and then just export it directly from there. Because it loves to change. Word loves to change fonts back in reference lists and tables of contents and all that type of stuff. Cool. You've used page breaks. Very nice. They've got an acknowledgement section in here. Team member 1 provided a 3D model. Sweet. Team member 2 provided workshop space. Excellent. That's really nice. That's a great acknowledgement section here. Nice, broken up. I don't know why that's red. I don't know if that's only red on my screen, but it shouldn't be. It should be black. I know I have dark mode on, so that kind of messes up some of these things. Nice figures, nice figures. Cool. Decent photographs. This is an acknowledgement of team member 1, who either provided the photo or provided the design, or maybe provided both in this case. Very nice. I like that a lot. Looks like we're going to get versions of prototype. So prototype 4 or V1. I think that's V1. Prototype V2. Yep. Sweet. Nice. You don't, unless that came from maybe that came from a report. You probably don't need Team's unpublished work. You probably could have just gone and done what you did up here, team member 1 or 2, depending on whose photo it was, or design by team member 1, photo by team member 2, as needed. Yep, you're consistent here. You could have said tutor 1 instead of tutor X, but that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Nice. Prototyping costs, preliminary testing, prototype 4, final design. Cool. Oh, I don't know if I love the formatting of this table, but it's not bad. I don't quite know why I don't like the formatting of this table. Maybe I'd prefer that to all be left aligned. I mean, I'm picking on something here that's just not a problem. I think I prefer this more, but it's fine. It's fine. It's a table. It has a table number. It probably doesn't need that vertical line, especially if you left align that and then you right align a bunch of this. And then you potentially look at changing some of the table widths down so that you're not wasting so much space. You probably don't need that. Can I grab this end? Do I have to grab that end? I have to grab that end. I probably shouldn't have done it that way. Pull you over and then maybe center that. Yeah, I like that quite a lot more, but to be fair, I'm splitting hairs at this stage. That's fine. It's a nice thing to have done. Notes for yourself, which is fine. Just don't forget. Bunch of data. Unfortunately, due to a faulty generator, no measurements power. The team also realized due to malfunction of the aerofoil's power production would have been brief. It's testing early. Just because you didn't get power doesn't mean you don't have things to talk about here. Talk about how it spun. Talk about what its startup speed was. Talk about whether it was balanced, whether it was spinning quickly, whether a gearing system was working or not. You have heaps to talk about here, whether you got power out or not. I know I normally stress put more numbers in, but you've still got a lot of stuff you can talk about there. Bunch of improvements and evaluations, discussion. This I don't know. I'm moving pretty quickly, deliberately. Well, this all actually might just be a little bit brief. I would come back to this a day or two after having written it, and because you wrote it early, you get the benefit of being able to do this. And just reread it and make sure that everything that you want to say in here is in here. I know in your head right now it's probably super duper obvious, but to somebody else who hasn't seen any of this before, never seen the big wind tunnel, doesn't know what it's like, doesn't know how other teams performed, you might be able to expand some of these sections significantly. Ah, okay, cool. You do have some of this in here though. So you're going to do some comparisons to other teams, which is cool. I like that. I like that a lot. Just yeah, okay. I mean, you may have all the puzzle pieces there. They just maybe could do with some expanding, and then you have a conclusion. Sweet. Look, I think there's probably a bit more body to add in some of these sections, but overall it's pretty good. Okay, how am I doing for time? 10 minutes left. All right. Oh, I'm gonna survive. I'm not gonna pull up any more, but I will answer any final questions. So if you have any final questions, please chuck them in the chat now. I'll answer them and then I will call it. Sweet. Is the table of contents limited to one page? No, no. It can be longer. Word has a tendency to spread them out quite a lot, and that's fine. If it goes over 2 pages, it goes over 2 pages. You're all good there. Don't stress it. It shouldn't. I'll check the brief to make sure I didn't accidentally imply something. I didn't put a page limit on any of that, right? No, there's no page limits on any of these things. Your list of figures might end up over 2 pages as well, although I would doubt it. For the models and designs section, do you talk about the group's previous designs here or in the final design tab? For the models and design section, what models and design section? There's a description of design. There's an assumptions and models. This is models as an engineer talks about models, right? From the week 2 lecture, the models and assumptions lecture, right? That's what we mean when we say models. So if you want to talk about previous prototypes, almost certainly description of design is the place to put them. Not assumptions and models here. The only reason you would potentially put one in is if you made a prototype specifically to test one of the assumptions or one of the mathematical models that you use, then you might put it in there. Can the tutor's name be used in an acknowledgement or reference, or should it be anonymized also? In an acknowledgement, it should be anonymized. In a reference, it doesn't have to be. Formatting on table costs, list of costs aligned by decimal point. You could. That's a nice thing to do. I wouldn't stress. It's a annoying thing to do, so I wouldn't stress too much about it. So if this has already been answered, but does the robot project need a prototype cost? It doesn't. I'm pretty sure that's in the thing because of how I saw a bunch of costs that were being done not super well. So I screenshotted the costs. Yeah, see. I screenshotted the cost slide from the lecture. This is from the week 10 lecture. You've had it. This is what I talked about in week 10 at length. So when we talk about costs, not really, like go watch the week 10 lecture because you actually get the explanation with it, but not really applicable to the robot project. You still talk about value, but you don't need exact dollars. So if you deliberately cut down on sensors aiming to be low cost, you can still absolutely talk about that. But trying to get a total cost for the whole robot is sort of meaningless in some ways, because it would get scaled very differently and stuff like that. So talk about value, absolutely, but don't feel you need exact dollaries for cost. Do list of figures and list of tables need to be on a separate page, or they can be both be on the same if it fits? You should put them on separate pages it wouldn't, personally, I wouldn't mind. If they both fit on one, I would let that slide. But in terms of the fact that you don't really know who your market is and you don't know what they're going to pick up on and what they're not, you're probably better off to just put them on separate pages, because then you absolutely haven't done, nobody can accuse you of having done the wrong thing. Yeah, you wasted some page, but that doesn't matter because none of these things appear in a page count. So yeah, probably put them on separate pages. Cool. All right, I'm at the bottom of the questions. We're going again on Thursday, so I'll call it here. I'll see you guys Thursday. Hopefully I feel less like death warmed up by that stage, and I can be a little bit more helpful to you. Good luck over the next couple of days, everybody. I'll see you Thursday, okay?